most of the original cafes in many museums that had them were relegated to the basement. They weren't very attractive. They weren't nice spaces. They really were not something that visitors were excited about, and
Mm,
that arts leadership really saw as almost a necessary evil.
mm,
Once we sort of hit I'd say somewhere in the 90s, that viewpoint started to change, because
mm.
I think in general, people became much more focused on sort of the culinary arts, and people started to get
Mm.
to know those name chefs and those celebrity chefs,
Okay,
and
right.
the whole environment really changed, and museums also started looking at.
Hello, and welcome to another episode of Nakoto Building Arts. I'm your host, Nakoto, and today I'd like to welcome another insightful guest to the podcast, Tracy Lawler. Tracy is the president of JGL Consultants, a food service and retail consulting firm based in Princeton, New Jersey. They specialize in cultural institutions, corporate dining, and higher education facilities. Through JGL, Tracy advises museums, performing arts centers, zoos, aquariums, and other places of public attraction on how to develop a successful cafe, restaurant, or retail store, build a profitable event rental program, improve their food service and retail operations, and contract with a food service or retail store operator. Tracy and her team have provided this service to more than 300 clients nationwide. A few of those notable projects include the Arkansas Museum of Fine Arts project in Little Rock, Arkansas, a project designed by Studio Gang, the Burke Museum located on the campus of the University of Washington in Seattle, designed by Osen Kundik, the Norton Museum of Art expansion in West Palm Beach, Florida, designed by Foster and Partners. It gives me great pleasure to welcome Tracy Lawler to the podcast. How are you today, Tracy?
I am doing well, Makoto. Excited to be here. I love talking about what we do. We all have a passion for the arts, and it's really a great segment to work in and support.
And thank you for joining me. I was hoping to try to get you last year, but schedules didn't work out. But I'm glad I was able to get you this year in the new year. So I was thinking when I was trying to in the process of me scheduling with you, I actually had another client, and they were asking, Do you know of a food service or food consulting company?" And obviously, the only person I can really think of was you, Tracy. And I said, well, okay. I told him about you. Then I said, well, let me also ask some of the people in the industry. So I started calling around to other people, and I said, have you tried Tracy? Yes. Okay. I called somebody else. Have you tried Tracy? It's like, so,
Well,
so I
that's
guess
music to
you
my
are the go.
ears.
So you are the go-to person for food consulting business. So yeah, it's good to have
Yeah,
you on board.
we're lucky. We really have it's such a niche business, and
Mhm.
we've been in business. We actually just celebrated our 40th year.
Okay.
So
Okay.
it's very specialized, and we've established a great client list, and they're all very collegial. So we're fortunate to have worked with so many great organizations over the years.
Okay, great, great, great. And I'd like to hear some more about that. So I don't know a whole lot about the food consulting business. The purpose and the intent of this channel, really, the Building Arts, is to talk to different people in the whole consulting realm of building museums or building performing arts centers and seeing how they fit into the whole pie to make a successful business operation for
Mhm.
a performing arts center or museum. So you fit into the puzzle as the food consultant. So I really want to be educated and learn more about that. But before we get into that, I'd like to find out more about your background, like where you're from originally, and how did you even get into this business?
Yeah. So I was born in New York City and moved around quite a lot with my family because my father was actually a senior officer for several food service management companies, which I'll
Oh,
get to in a minute.
okay.
But we landed in Princeton, New Jersey when I was 16, and I actually am still in New Jersey, based in New Jersey. Um, I've always been somebody who was a hard worker. At 16, I had three jobs just because I like working, and one of those jobs was at a local coffee shop, and
Oh,
that's really where I learned my love of the hospitality business. So throughout high school and college, I worked as a waiter, a cater waiter, a bartender, a banquet server, pretty much anything you could do at 18 and under
yeah.
in a restaurant or banquet facility. I actually got my undergrad degree in economics at Rutgers, and after completing that, I went through a management training program at Charlie Brown's, which was a very well-known restaurant chain in I won't say
Mhm.
how long ago, but a while ago
I
in New
think I've heard of
Jersey.
that. Yeah.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
so I did that for a couple of years and
Mhm.
really learned a lot and really enjoyed it. But I also realized that I didn't really want to be working until 2 a.m. every night. And the social life, if you're working in the operations in a restaurant business, it really does, impede. It's difficult. It's a tough business
Yeah.
on
Yeah.
many fronts. So I actually left the business. I went into magazine publishing. I've always been a big reader and I have
Oh,
always
wow.
loved magazines. And I was in that field for about 10, 15 years. I worked my way up to general manager of some national magazines. And along the way, I got my MBA at New York University at Stern School of Business.
Oh, awesome.
Um, and then in the late 90s, going back to my father, who had
Mhm.
been in the business, he actually founded my company. He founded JGL
Mhm.
as a consultancy specializing in the arts. He knew the contract side of the business. He understood how the food service management companies looked at this business. And he was also, we finally refer to him and my mother as culture vultures. They really, were always at the opera or going to museums or
Oh, okay.
symphonies. So
Yeah.
they personally really love the arts as well.
Mhm.
So he found just a great combination of these two loves of his and started JGL. I started working with him in 98, and really just starting with some of the financial projections because I had that MBA
Mhm.
background.
Mhm.
And within a couple of years, he was really starting to teach me everything about the business, and was bringing me to client meetings. And a couple of years after that, we put a succession plan together. He retired in 2010.
Oh, okay.
And since then, we've grown. We're now a team of seven, and we've expanded our services, and we sort of continue on every year. But one of the things that I always find interesting about my team is that pretty much everybody has experience in operations, so they
Mhm.
understand working in a food service environment. But educationally, 4 out of the 7 people on my team have an arts background and have a
Okay.
degree in theater
Wow.
arts.
Wow. Wow.
So it's not really, people frequently ask me how do you get to do something like this? And
Mhm.
my route was certainly very circuitous, and actually
Mhm.
most of the people on my team were as well.
Well, yeah, I hear that. Yeah, thinking of the restaurants, I have a neighbor that owns a restaurant, and he says it's just so tough. He's always like, you want to take it from me?" It's
It's
not
a tough
not an easy
business.
business. It's not an
Mm-mm.
easy business to be in. So yeah, but that's interesting too how your parents, they had a arts love of arts and
Yes.
the restaurant skill and merge those.
Yes.
I guess they saw the need for that in the performing arts and cultural arts space.
Yeah. It's really interesting looking back at it over, a period of 30 or 40 years. I think back in the 80s and 90s, most museum directors really were not very interested in food services. I mean, it was
Mm,
it was really something they had to do. Most of the original cafes in many museums that had them were relegated to the basement. They weren't very attractive. They weren't nice spaces. They really were not something that visitors were excited about, and
Mm,
that, arts leadership really saw as almost a necessary evil.
mm,
Once we sort of hit I'd say somewhere in the 90s, that viewpoint started to change, because
mm,
I think, in general, people became much more focused on sort of the culinary arts, and people started to get
mm.
to know those name chefs and those celebrity chefs,
Okay,
and
right.
the whole environment really changed, and museums also started looking at dining outlets as a way to, extend the length of stay and deepen the connection to the visitor and generate some income and,
Mm,
create some community. And that
mm,
just has continued to evolve over the last 20 years. I mean, now there's a lot of conversations about your food service reflecting mission and vision and
mm,
values. And
mm,
there's a lot of passion associated with it. I think that's, again, my team, everybody on our team loves what
mm,
we do, because it's really fun. We get to connect
mm,
those pieces, and
mm,
ultimately we look at that visitor food service, whether it's a restaurant or a cafe, or even, an intermission bar and a performing arts
mm.
center. It should and can add to the visitor experience. You
Yeah,
you
right.
see a show and you get this great cocktail that is
Mm-hmm,
designed
mm-hmm,
specifically for the performance. So
right.
it's a really interesting and creative
Mm-hmm,
space, and merging that understanding, as you said, of the
mm-hmm,
operations and the creative
mm-hmm.
piece
Right,
is really
right.
fun.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah. Um, so with JGL, so your parents started, it succeeded to
But
you. Now
just my
you,
dad, not my mother, just my father.
just
Yeah,
your dad,
yeah,
and it succeeded to
yeah.
you. Um, so now are most of your projects museums or performing arts centers?
So we have worked with about 300 arts organizations nationwide.
Okay.
Museums are probably, in the cultural sector, the biggest
Right.
group of our clients.
Okay.
Performing arts and zoos and aquariums are probably tied for the next, we do an equal amount of those groups. But they
Mm-hmm.
all have very similar needs. They
Mm-hmm.
have very similar things they're looking to accomplish, just in different environments.
Okay, okay. Yeah. And you started talking about the patron experience. So I do want to ask you about a little bit about that later. But before we do that, I wanted to ask you, for some of those projects that you've worked on, are there a few of your favorites? Or I know the Arkansas Arts Museum, we actually,
Yeah,
as a cost consultant, I worked on that project. So I remember that one.
right.
Are there any favorites that you
So
have?
Nakoto, that's a great question, because that's sort of like asking who's your favorite child, which I'll never answer.
Ah.
But I was thinking about that question, and so, there were three that came to mind, and I actually do have, hopefully, photos that I can try and share if you'd like me to.
Yeah, let
So,
me
and actually, oops, once you enable it, I should be able to. Um, Actually, one of them is the Arkansas Museum of Fine Arts.
Mhm.
Um, and so this is just, I'm sure, very familiar to you, an image of the exterior
Yes.
of this
Hmm.
beautiful studio gang design building.
Oh yeah.
And
Have you
then
made
we
it out
have,
there?
I have not, I
I
can't
haven't
wait. Yeah,
either.
you have or you haven't?
I have not. I've been. I'm going to make sure to get out there to see the
Gotcha. And then
finished
I'm just
product.
going to show you an image of the restaurant, which unfortunately I'm not seeing right now. So actually I'm going to stop sharing, because I'm not seeing it at the moment. Um, so that project, I think, was just a beautiful beautiful building, name
Hmm.
architect, really creative architect, and we always love
Hmm.
that. Um, and one of the reasons I really enjoyed working on that was because I know we made a huge difference to the client. They had
Hmm.
unfortunately engaged with another consultant who didn't really understand the local market, and sort of
Hmm.
made some assumptions that weren't going to work for them from a business perspective. And we came in and caught that sort of in time, so that they could
Hmm.
retool, redesign some of the kitchen spaces to really be
Hmm.
able to use the spaces in an effective manner.
Okay.
And that one for me was important, because I know had we not been able to make those changes, they would not have been able to achieve what they were hoping to
Hmm.
achieve.
Okay.
So that was one that certainly came to mind. And actually another one, which you mentioned as well, which again, I will share a photo of it real quickly, is the Norton Restaurant. So this
Awesome.
obviously again in West Palm, it is a Foster project. And I'm showing a picture of the bar that's in the restaurant, and you see these beautiful columns on here.
Hmm. Yeah.
So again, we worked with the Norton on for several years on planning the spaces and on putting together the rental program and putting their rental policies in place. And
Hmm.
we brought our kitchen designer in to work on it. We had a lot of very robust dialogue with Foster about the placement of the bar in relation
Hmm.
to the columns. And they really argued very um, passionately about where the columns had to be in relation to the bar, and we were sort of just as passionate about getting enough space for the bar from an
Hmm.
operational perspective. And when I went there to visit pre-construction, and I stood in the restaurant and I saw the line of vision going all the way through the museum with these columns, I had that aha moment and realized it's that genius of Foster and their
Hmm.
design. And I suddenly understood why they were fighting so hard for that space.
Yeah.
So it was an interesting and fun project, and again, a beautiful space, and the restaurant is doing really well, and the client's very happy with the program.
Yeah. Awesome. Awesome. That's
Um,
great.
and yeah, and then I think that the third recent project that is sort of a favorite, a very different project. It was actually Liberty Science Center. It's not a recent, it's not a renovation, but it was
Hmm.
a vendor selection process that
Okay.
incorporated technology and brought in an Amazon Go type market into the facility,
Mm.
which really made a lot of sense for their visitation and their base, and created efficiency and scales that
Hmm.
that they didn't have before. So that would be another one that would, and ultimately also ended up really growing their sales and
Hmm.
the earned income back to the client.
Awesome. Awesome. So, if to help me understand, so to put in some words of what actually you do as all the services you offer, can you sort of break that down and explain to us?
I would love to, because there's a lot of confusion about what we do.
Yeah.
I get a lot of phone calls saying I need a food service consultant. And I
Hmm.
say, okay, what exactly do you need? Well, what they really mean is they need a kitchen designer. So we're not kitchen designers.
Okay.
Our services fall under what is known as management advisory services, or
Mm.
MAS. We come before the kitchen designers, or we ideally we come before the kitchen designers,
Hmm. Hmm.
to provide for a new building, for a new facility, really that programming, sort of, what kinds of outlets should you have? Is it going to be a table service restaurant? Is it a
Hmm.
kiosk? Is it a cafe? Is it one of each? Where should they be? How much space should they be? How many people do you need to serve? What does the business model look like? All
Okay.
of those planning elements. And and before we can do any of that, or before a designer can sort of then lay out those kitchens,
Hmm.
we need to answer all of those business questions. So the question of how big should the kitchen be in this new museum depends on, are you going to have a full restaurant? Are you looking to make it a restaurant that is a
Hmm.
destination where people are coming to the restaurant, perhaps just to visit the restaurant and not even necessarily the museum? Are you going to also have a catering program? Are you going to do weddings and corporate events? And if you are, do you want to cook everything on site, or should you hire a caterer who has an off-premise commissary? So our work really revolves around doing all of that
Hmm.
study while we're interacting with the client team, the architectural team, the local market, understanding what the norms are in the local market, because the norms really change from market to market. I referred earlier to that challenge that we had at the Arkansas Museum of Fine Art had with their initial consultant. That issue was because they didn't understand the local market. They didn't
Hmm.
understand that there weren't any off-premise caterers who could do business in that facility, and so they needed to build a full kitchen.
Hmm.
So we do a lot of that ground study
Okay.
work falling
Hmm.
under that management advisory, which then informs the kitchen design. So
Okay.
we do have an affiliation with a kitchen designer who we bring in,
Hmm.
but that doesn't happen until after we've done our initial work, which we call feasibility work,
Yeah,
or
that's what it is.
sort of
Yeah.
needs assessment. We
Mhm.
also do a lot of operational consulting for existing facilities. So that would be assessments of existing programs. Again, their retail or their food service, helping
Mhm.
them understand how to do it better. And most of our clients are they're not operating these outlets themselves. They're contracting it to a third party vendor. So we come in as a consultant and help both them and that third party vendor understand how they might achieve their goals, whether it's selling more of their branded logo in their store, whether it's bringing more people to the restaurant, whether it's having more weddings, making more money, being more sustainable,
Mhm.
incorporating
Mhm.
DEAI. And then the third thing we do is we do what's called an RFP process. So we do a lot of
Mhm.
selection processes for
Yeah.
our clients who are looking for
Okay.
vendors to either run their food service or their retail.
Oh, yeah. Okay. Well, that actually clears a lot up for me because I was sort of confused on that as well. Not really
Hmm.
understanding, do you design it? Do you design the kitchen? Or so you're in the upfront and helping set the vision and working with the owner to, like you said, assess their needs and setting out a plan to make that successful. So yeah,
Absolutely.
that's great.
And that's really part of that's the most important part of the planning, because
Mhm.
obviously from being in the field that most of these arts organizations are 501(c)(3)s, they're
Right.
not for profits. So they also, in addition to managing that building budget, they really need to be thinking about their operating budget in the
Right.
out years. And so
Right.
our role is to make sure that the design is not going to be driving their costs. So,
Mhm.
as an example, we've worked with many architects. We've had the pleasure of working with many architects, and
Right.
um, you know, they're frequently focused on really designing a beautiful space, and we've had many dialogues where there might be a desire to sort of hide some of the equipment because maybe it's not
Mm.
so
Okay.
attractive. And
Mhm.
so we're the ones who have to point out, well, you can do that, but if you do that, it's going to require more labor to operate, which is going
Mm.
to impact the operating budget every single year and reduce the income coming back to the client.
Mhm.
So we're always focusing on that end result and what the facility, how the facility is going to operate in the future.
Okay. Helpful. Yeah. So when I started off, I said I talked to some people and they kept mentioning Tracy, 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 but I'm sure there's some competition out there for you. So that leads me to my question of how do you normally get selected for these projects?
Yeah.
Is it?
So it's a couple of different ways. Probably the most common way, and I'm sure you've experienced this too. Arts organizations are very collegial. They have their colleagues, whether it's in other markets or whether it's an existing market, and so a lot of times our clients recommend us to
Mhm.
other colleagues they have either in existing markets or in other markets. So,
Mhm.
we did some work. We started doing some work in Seattle a couple of years ago. You mentioned the University of Washington. We worked on the
Mhm.
Burke Museum. And after that project, one by one, the arts institutions recommended us to other arts organizations.
Right.
And we started joking that we needed to get an apartment in Seattle because we were doing so much work there. Um, and two, colleagues that we've worked with at organizations who move to other organizations will frequently, when they need somebody, call us and simply ask us. They'll simply call us and tell us what their problem is and ask for a proposal, and we'll have just a direct negotiation with them. Um, Sometimes we're brought on as part of a design team. And that's actually happening a little bit more frequently. It used to be for us, we almost always contracted directly with the client. But we are getting asked to be on design teams pretty frequently. Um, there's actually not that many companies that do what we do, so it's not uncommon if there's 5 or 6 architects submitting for a process for us to be on 3 or 4 teams. We can't offer exclusivity because there's a lot more
Right.
architects than there
Right.
are of us.
We
Um,
know about that.
yeah. And then I think probably We also do obviously business development. I mean, we
Mhm.
track projects and we keep in touch with people and are sort of, reaching out about projects that are underway. But
Okay.
really the bulk of our business probably does come through referral.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you alluded to it earlier about you started talking about the experience, and I hear that a lot with the patron experience. We're working on several projects as a cost consultant of they're expanding their lobbies and they're creating new cafe spaces or restaurants. Uh, can you sort of tell me more about the patron experience and how it relates to the business model and the facility operations and how you advise clients in that arena?
Yeah. So the patron or visitor experience to us is really sort of the core of what we do. Going back to we really believe that the food service experience should enhance the overall visit. Um, we want our clients, customers to leave and, go home and go out on social media and
Right,
say,
right.
I saw this exhibition and I had an amazing, whatever it was, a croissant or avocado toast
Mhm,
or what have you. So there's a lot of different ways that you can accomplish that, right? So you can accomplish it through the culinary selection, through, sort of tying it to the programming or to the exhibition. You can
mhm,
accomplish it through service. You can accomplish it through having it mirror your values and what's important to you organizationally. You can accomplish it
mhm,
through bringing in, local partners so that you're really getting
mhm,
some local flavor. Um, so our role is to really go in and evaluate if there is an existing facility, how well it's currently being done,
mhm,
and make recommendations on how to improve it. So as in our retail work, as an example,
mhm,
a big part of what we do is really look at how do the products that are being offered relate to the exhibition or the visit itself. Ideally, it
mhm,
should be really unique and curated to the visitor experience so that it really becomes something that the guest is purchasing and taking home to remember this great
mhm,
visit
mhm,
that they had. And then simultaneously, we have a lot of clients who are really focused on diversifying their audiences, on
mhm,
reaching groups that perhaps didn't feel welcome before, or aren't currently heavy visitors,
mhm,
or in for many of our clients, looking to connect with younger audiences. And so
mhm,
that may mean a very different type of connection and experience. It
mhm,
might mean late nights in a museum with a very different experience and very different vibe. So
mhm. Right.
we're always taking our cue from our clients and their strategic plans and their goals and their initiatives, and then translating that and applying that into food service.
Mhm,
University of the Burke Museum at UW is a great example of that. So that was actually already designed and
mhm.
laid out before we even came on board.
Okay.
And the space that they allotted for the cafe was very, very small and was going to be a hard space to work in. Um, and because it was on the campus of UW, they couldn't have what we call an exclusive provider. They couldn't have one vendor running
Mhm.
everything. They had to allow multiple vendors in for catered events.
Yeah.
So it was tough for us to find a vendor that would be a good fit. But we took a look at, again, who they were and what their collection was, and they had a really strong indigenous Native American collection.
Mhm,
And so we scoured the Seattle market, and my colleague David found this food truck that was very popular called Off the Res, that was ready to make their leap
mhm.
into a bricks
Okay.
and mortar location. So
Mhm,
they opened their first retail bricks and mortar location at UW, and it actually landed on the Eater 38 list and has been wildly successful, and has worked really well for them on many, many fronts. So that was sort of a great example of working with the client and
mhm,
their mission and their goals and their collection to find the solution for them within an already planned footprint. I
Yeah,
mean, ideally we get to plan the footprint, but sometimes
right.
sometimes we don't. And so that's worked really well for them.
I guess coming in early too, when it's not already planned out, that's the best because you get to see what's happening and in your feasibility and needs assessment, you can help design something. That really leads me to a question: do you work with architects on actually designing, as far not designing the space, but uh, making sure there's enough space of how the restaurant or cafe will fit into the building. I ask
Yes.
that because you think about some sites may have the opportunity to take advantage of the view, and so they'll have a rooftop unit or rooftop cafe. Do you go on the site and work with the architect to determine what's best, or how does that work?
We do, and you're right. We like to get in as early as we
Mhm.
can. So really, we would prefer to be in on a project, either in early concept
Mhm.
or, early schematic.
Okay.
And the more elements there are in a food service or retail program, the sooner we want to be in. So
Okay.
a lot of museums do look for sort of that, destination restaurant where
Yeah.
they're
Yeah.
looking to attract people to the museum or arts organization, who are dining, independently of visiting the facility. And for those, it's really important that we get in early because we need to have input on what's the best location. The best location is right by the
Mhm.
entrance with a separate entrance so that it can be open, during times when the museum is closed, with a view, so what size should
Mhm.
it be? How many square feet should it be? And that really goes back to that needs assessment work. So
Mhm.
we're behind the scenes doing a lot of number crunching, looking at the attendance projections, looking at the general area, looking at restaurants in the area to figure out how many diners do we think we're going to need to accommodate, and then
Mhm.
backing into what does that mean in terms of square footage, and what are the other things we need? Is it going to have a bar? Does it have private
Mhm.
dining? And then some of those other elements, is it are the restrooms not well located because the servers are
Right.
going to pass the
Right.
guests
Right.
on the way?
Right.
So
Right.
so yeah, we work very closely with the architectural team and the client team, and to share our viewpoint on where things should be.
Mhm.
I think, I'm sure from doing all of these projects that, the rules are there's never enough storage space, and there's just never
Right.
enough space
Right.
to begin with, because you start value engineering. So
Yes.
we're constantly working,
Mhm.
working with the teams to react and respond to changes in the
Mhm.
design as it progresses throughout the project.
Right. I have just a couple more questions. One of the questions is ask the experts question, where I ask, and you're the expert. So, how much earned income can a museum generate from its food service or retail program?
So it's a question that does not have a strict rule of thumb, but what I can say is that we have worked with clients who have generated low to mid seven figures, so between 1 million and 3 million, combined on annually, on their food service, rental, and retail program. So when I refer to their rental program, that's their catered events, so the corporate
Mhm.
events and the weddings and so forth. So I certainly wouldn't ever say the sky's the limit, but if it's well designed and well thought out and there's good
Mhm.
policies in place, you really can generate some significant revenue, which is, from a cultural perspective, you don't have to go out and fundraise for it every year. Once you've developed your program, and you continue managing it effectively, that's income that you really can count on from an earned perspective annually. So there's a very, very wide range of what these organizations can generate from that. And it really depends, again, upon the size of the facility, the types of activities they have. From a food service perspective,
Mhm.
the catered events are what generates the most income for most museums.
Mhm.
Restaurants and cafes, well, retail is probably next, and then restaurants and cafes are actually probably last.
Mhm.
But all of those components go into that income generation potential. So there's unfortunately not a formula where you can
Yeah,
say half of your
yeah.
attendance times six and you'll have your
Yeah,
number.
yeah, not a rule of
But
thumb. Okay.
it is um you know, probably some of the most important things that govern it really relate around, the policies and what the institution allows to happen, and whether or not leadership is really actively supporting it and sees it as a benefit to the
Mhm.
organization, as opposed to looking at it as something that is perhaps not something they're interested in doing.
Mm. And I assume you see a lot of since COVID, when everything started shifting and moving outside, and uh, people taking advantage of the outdoor space. Have you had to counsel in that aspect of it as well?
Yeah, it's been interesting because obviously during COVID, all of our clients closed, and
Right.
many of them, uh depending on the market and the type of outlet, some of them still are not back to full pre-pandemic attendance levels. And so they have operationally had to really take a hard look at what types of visitor food service and retail they're retaining, because it has not in
Mhm.
some cases come back fully. Um, I would say in terms of um, some of the things that have sort of been lasting impacts of COVID would certainly be technology and the self-checkout. We're
Okay.
seeing that in a lot of museums, and that's worked well for them as well, particularly because of some labor shortages in particular markets, and for some organizations it works quite well, and it ties in with their mission. So with a science museum, it makes lots of sense. Our outdoor clients, so our park clients, our garden clients, our zoo clients, many of them continue to see increasing attendance, and have really sort of taken some of their COVID practices and continued to keep them in place. One of the things we've seen operationally that really has impacted food service, and it was a COVID change that again many museums have kept, is time ticketing.
Oh.
So whereas
Mhm.
before many of them did not have time ticketing, many instituted that during COVID. And for facilities whose cafes are undersized,
Mhm.
time ticketing is really a great thing, because
Mhm.
they're not going to get flooded, because there just aren't going to be as many people in, at once. So that's actually been a real benefit to some of our clients post COVID, and many of them have retained it.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I'm starting to see a lot of the kiosk and ordering food by that now in other restaurants. I was down in
Yeah,
Miami, I guess sometime last year, and went to a restaurant. It was like that. It's oh, okay. No one's coming up. All right, now
yeah,
let me look at the menu here.
yeah.
uh, so, what do clients need to consider when hiring a food service consultant? What's some of the things they need to consider?
Yeah, I think that they need to really consider what type of experience the food service consultant has, and if they've worked on similar projects in the past.
Mhm.
The arts in particular are a very unique environment. I think we started off this
Mhm.
discussion by talking about how difficult the restaurant business is.
Right.
Um, and when you take a restaurant and you put it into a museum, wants to have something to say about either the menu or the prices or the hours or the staffing or any number of things, does can make it harder. So it's make sure that the consultant you're looking at has experience in your sector, because somebody who consults for street restaurants may not understand the nuances of the museum world, and may not sort of really get that visitor experience piece that is so important to so many clients. Um, I would say the other piece is really, just looking at other work that they've done, and sort
Mhm.
of, talking to clients, because I find that certainly when I'm hiring somebody, a great way to learn about
Mhm.
work approach and ethic, and then finally, I would say, um, really make sure there's a solid understanding of what you're hoping to accomplish. I
Mhm.
think that the clearer the goals are and the scope is, the more successful any project is. And then finally, I'm gonna just, if you're going to embark upon it, then give it the time it needs.
Mhm.
And make sure you focus on it, because that sometimes can be an impediment too.
Yeah, that makes sense. Great advice.
Mhm.
Last couple questions here. What advice can you give someone who wanted to join your line of work? You mentioned earlier some came from in your company from the arts background,
It's
and
background. Yeah.
what pathway is the best way to join what you're doing?
Yeah. So I look for people who have food service operations experience within our particular verticals. So somebody who has managed food services at a museum on behalf of a third party vendor. Really, all of my employees have had operations experience, several of them in museums, several of them in performing arts centers, some in higher education, some in corporate dining. So from a work experience, that's one of the things I look for. The other things that are important for success in our line of work, we do a lot of writing, we do a lot of reports. So you
Okay.
really need to be a good writer. You need to be an excellent communicator. You need to be able to interface with everybody from, a board trustee on down to the person who's, doing the administrative scheduling for your catered events. So you really need to have the ability to establish that rapport with people at multiple levels. Um, and then creativity. I mean, I'm always the passion and the creativity are an absolute requirement, that you really sort of need to love the arts, um, and culinary, and be
Mhm.
excited about finding new and unique ways to put those together in ways that really go back to, again, that visitor experience, that patron
Mhm.
experience.
Okay, great. You mentioned writing. I thought about chat and GPT. How would that how would that help? I guess it may help your business, or I don't know how that's going to work in our all of our consulting fields
Yeah.
in the future. So yeah.
It'll be interesting to see. We've experimented a little bit playing around with it, just on
Oh wow.
some simple topics, and
Yeah.
it's sort of scary what it comes back with.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah.
Well, we'll see. We'll see what happens in the future.
Yeah.
What's next for you? Any new project? What's next for you?
Yeah. So we always have, as a team, we probably typically have anywhere between 20 and 25 projects underway, and that's sort of, our standard. We do have a couple of presentations coming up this year that I'm excited about. We are presenting at building museums in March in Philadelphia. We're presenting with some clients there, with the Bruce Museum in Greenwich and the Studio Museum in Harlem. Those are two expansion projects, that one that's recently completed, one that is just about to be completed. So we're presenting about the planning of the food service and the finding of
Okay.
a vendor for those two. And then I've also got a great panel put together for the American Alliance of Museums annual meeting in May in Baltimore. And on that one, I have five clients in the arts sector, just really having a discussion about all things related to food service and retail. So focusing not only on the business elements of it, but sustainability and DEAI, and how their viewpoints of these programs are changing and what's important to
Mhm.
them institutionally. So I think that'll be a really great conversation. We're excited about that. And then probably not this year, but I hope soon. We've had some discussions about potentially expanding to the UK.
Oh,
So
awesome.
if we were to expand into any other markets, that would be the next place we'd head.
Oh, that's exciting. That's very exciting.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know about the Building Museums conference, so I hope to see you there in Philly. So,
Come
but
to our session.
yeah, I put that on the list. The final question is, how can our viewers get in contact with you?
Absolutely. They can email me, Tracy, Tracy, at jglconsultants.com, or go to our website, jglconsultants.com, and fill out a form and send an email. or LinkedIn as well. And love to hear from people. I'm always happy to answer any questions if anybody has any casual questions that we could help them with.
Awesome. Awesome. I'll put your information down in the information spot. This has certainly been very insightful conversation. I learned a lot, finally understanding the food service consulting portion of the business of the whole organization. So I really thank you for your time, and hope
Thank
you
you,
have
Dakota.
a great 2024.
All right, same to you. Great seeing you, and I'll see you in March at Building Museums.
All right. See you soon. Thanks.
Thank
Talk to you
you.
later.
Bye-bye.